Hello, welcome to the Gestalt Show. We talk about psychology, design, and all the interesting things in between. I'm Mohsin, and this is episode 1. I'm somebody who enjoys coffee. I often need coffee to do work, and because of that, I always find myself doing work at cafes. So there's this one cafe in Shah Alam. I love to go there to do work, and it has a very nice environment. It's not too loud, it's not too busy. The interior is industrial. They have this bare concrete walls. Some would even say it's boring, but I love it because they also have a lot of natural sunlight. They have some plants all over the place, and the food is good there. It's also a bakery, so the cafe always filled with the smell of fresh bread. It's very calming. But let me also tell you about my least favorite place to do work. And I know that there are people out there who love to do work there, which is McDonald's. So I really can't relate with people who love to do work there because I think it's loud, it's busy, and they have bright lights, and even the walls are bright. They have the McDonald's color of yellow and red. So yeah, I really don't like spending my time there. But don't get me wrong though, it's a great fast food restaurant. I love eating there. But I really believe that it's not a place that you should go to do work. So this begs the question, why do we like to go to some places and why don't we enjoy some other places, right? So this was actually a question that was asked by a designer to me before I even stepped into the design world, before I even started my career in design. So the story goes from 2020 when I joined my current company as a management trainee. So in the management trainee program, they had this job rotations where you go to different departments to learn about the process, the whole process of it. And one of the department that they sent me to was the design department. So apparently they had this project to design the cafe, and they wanted to know what makes a good cafe or bad cafe in terms of psychology. So they asked me, and I told them that I had no experience in design. So they had to give me some time to do my research. And while doing that research, I found out about the theory of approach avoidance by Mehrabian and Russell back in 1974. So the approach avoidance theory, it's a theory from environmental psychology, and basically what it's saying is that we decide to approach or to avoid an environment based on how the stimulus inside the environment affect our emotional state. And they are saying that there are 3 ways that the stimulus can affect our decision, which is through pleasure, arousal, and dominance. So I know this sounds a little bit sexual, but it is the term that they use inside the paper. And I often translate this to a more friendlier, less funny way to people. And the way I would say it is that pleasure, it just means how pleasant the environment is, and arousal is how the environment excites your 5 senses. You know, you have your sight, smell, your touch, your hearing, and also your sense of taste. So yeah, that's what arousal is. And finally, the dominance. Dominance is basically how much control that you have over the environment. So the relationship between these 3 emotional states to our decision to approach or to avoid is like an inverted U relationship. So what this means is that we approach environments that are exciting, pleasant, and we have environments that we have control over. But it only works up to a certain point. When it's above that point, right, it exceeds that point, we start to avoid those environments again. So basically, the more the environment gives you pleasantness, the more it excites your senses, or the more control that you have over it, the more likely you are to approach or to be attracted to the environment. But it only gets up to a certain point. Once it gets too overwhelming, for example, you start to avoid the environment again. So what does this mean to designers, right? So let's take one of the emotional states, which is arousal or excitement. How does your environment that you are designing excite the senses of your users or the people that will be in your environment? So let's take one of the 5 senses, which is sight. In our vision, there are a lot of stimulus that can affect our vision, right? Like for example, in your environment, you can have lightings, you can have different colors on the walls, and there's also the the stimulus of motion, the movement inside your environment. So to demonstrate this, let's go back to the example of the cafe that I talked about in the earlier part of the podcast, and also McDonald's. Why do I like that cafe, and why do I dislike staying for a long time in McDonald's? So the cafe, it had, like I said, it had natural lighting. It's bright, but it's not too bright. And even the walls, it's bare gray concrete walls, and it's neutral, and it's not too busy, it's not too bright. But In comparison, McDonald's, they have bright lights and the walls are red and yellow and it's busy. You can see people coming in and out of the restaurant. You can also see people working the kitchen behind the counter. So all of these variables or stimulus, it affects our sense of sight. And you can see that one is right at the sweet spot and one is a bit overwhelming, right? So the same thing can be applied to all our other senses. So you can see how your environment affects or excites the hearing of your customers, their sense of touch, their sense of taste, and also their sense of smell. All of this will affect whether they want to approach or to avoid the environment that you are designing for them. But also at the same time, designers can manipulate these variables to help them reach their goals. Like, let's go back to McDonald's, right? Is it bad that people don't want to stay in their environment? Is it bad that it's busy? Is it bad that there are a lot of movements inside the restaurant? If you ask me, I think they even intentionally designed it that way. Because if you look at the customer turnover, you see there's a lot of people coming in and out of the restaurant. Nobody really stayed in the McDonald's for a long time. It just means more sales for them. Let's say McDonald's is comfortable. You see a lot of people coming in, but nobody is really coming out. It's always full. Then how can new customers come in to buy burgers, right? So I guess the takeaway from this episode is that designers should approach from the point of view of the users or their customers. Like, for example, consider how the environment that they are designing affect the five senses of their customers. Because the theory says humans like to approach environments that are exciting but not overwhelming, right? But also, pleasant does not always mean good, because if you consider the goals of your products or services or environments, you can see that sometimes helping people to stay away, helping make the people feel uncomfortable, can lead to more sales. So I guess it's always the creative skill of the designer to determine what is good and what is bad for their environment. So I think that's it for this episode. We've talked about the approach-avoidance theory and how we can apply it in our designs. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you again in the next episode. In the meantime, take care and stay safe, everyone.